end of the afternoon, I'm going to tell you a story. And interestingly, I think it illustrates some of the very things that we've heard about in the other two presentations. And this tells the story of two teachers who wanted to challenge their students' thinking. It connects to the conference themes of shifting perspective because the teachers used drama to get students to interrogate their perspectives on challenging concepts that were cognitively distanced from the students' lives. A young man standing up for his beliefs and choosing not to go to war, and the impact of outsider invader forces on the land and on those who were there first. One chose a story set in New Zealand about conscientious objectors during the First World War, and the other used the sophisticated picture book The Rabbits to explore children's thinking about colonisation. Now, this is a very ordinary presentation. The schools were regular ordinary schools. The teachers were ordinary classroom teachers, though undoubtedly experienced and very capable. And it was a very short and simply run case study, conforming to reflective practice pattern, which has been around for years. I wanted to mentor those teachers and encourage those teachers towards taking a role as professional developers in the field of primary drama education, a field not well served just at the moment, and one I'm always looking to reinvigorate. My purpose as a researcher was to document how the teachers used the affordances of drama to connect those ideas with their students' thinking. And I wanted to document their work so that they can share their experience and expertise with other teachers. They do have huge potential, and it's just that unfortunate that it is still term time here, and Marsha is still teaching up in Ruawai, and Nikki is on a much needed holiday that was planned long in advance. They taught units, one with year 8 and the other with year 6. So that was 12 and 13-year-olds and 10 and 11-year-olds. Researching the practice gave a much sharper focus to our work and made us all attend to details of planning and timing and noticing. And looking back, there are 3 things which could be very sound advice which they will pass on in turn to their to other teachers. Giving feedback which valued and explicitly named what the students had done, and it lifted the students' performance by boosting their sense of competence and letting them know how to improve. A second thing was that drama did enable ideas which were distanced and remote and difficult and unfamiliar to become closer and more personally felt. And thirdly, students might arrive at different conclusions from what we might imagine at the beginning. But if we trust the process and give them the space and time to think, they will make sense of those ideas. And as researcher, I'm left with my own conclusions, but I'll leave those to the end. Now, first, my brother's war. To think about a young man refusing his country's orders to go to war and being shunned by family and community made for challenging material for Marsha's 13-year-olds. She's at Ruawai College, a rural school, distanced geographically. It's 2.5 hours northwest of Auckland. But in fact, it was Marsha's homegrown and personal knowledge of that community where she lived and taught that made her choose that book. For she'd played in the pipe band and at Anzac services alongside a man whose family members had been conscientious objectors. And Marsha had heard those stories. And in her words, I wanted the kids to learn what their ancestors did for our freedom. I wanted them to be proud. I wanted to educate them about the history without their knowing about it. And I wanted them to understand the past. The book is by a New Zealand author, David Hill. And possibly the best tribute to Marsha's drama work with the book was that attendance improved. Those students were coming to school because they wanted to see what happened. They wanted to hear and do more. They said, it really helps doing drama with English. it helps with understanding the book, and you understand the characters' feelings and going through what they're going through. And Marsha said later, with the drama work, they were going deeper. And it came through in their diary writing. My boy with special needs, he was actually putting words on paper, 5 lines. I'm really proud of him. And the significant success and the message that we take for students was the documenting of their work and the value of prompt and specific feedback to students. We were lucky. I was in the classroom. I photographed and then documented the work. I sent back files like the one you see there, recording their work and naming explicitly what they'd been doing. The effect was immediate. They liked getting the documentation the next day. It validated their work, it named what they'd done, and it let them think how they could work next time. That pride in their own work showed in their eagerness to get going. And these files were even more important as prompts during the interviews, which, because of holidays and timetables, weren't held until 4 weeks after the unit was complete. And there were 3 moments that more students identified really promptly and talked about very eagerly. One was when Marsha had taken a role and confronted them with what conscription meant. Unfortunately, there isn't a suitable photograph of that particular scene, but the title of the presentation came from that moment. That's not right, is it, miss? They also remembered vividly the moment that the brother who refused to sign up was led away from his workplace. That moment was photographed and is shown here with the feedback that was given to the group. Asked about conscientious objectors later, they said, I never knew that even if you didn't want to go, you had to. And like it said, you're not made to kill people. And now we have rights to make our own decisions. They also remembered another later scene when a group silently and simply laid greenery on a body in remembrance, as one of them read from the book. I remember her face when she was reading. Oh, it was really touching her, and like when Edmund laid the leaves on the dead bodies. And I contend that Marsha had those young people moving and talking and regrouping and imagining, and that in doing so she was working in brain-compatible ways that Miller and Saxton write of in their work, to see the world as if it were otherwise. They were shown what they'd done, they remembered it, they saw that their work had been valued, they tried the skills again, which met all of the brain's needs for variety and physical and mental movement. She was making drama work at the intersecting point between the story, the fiction of the drama strategies, and drama's pedagogical affordances. It was down-to-earth work and practical, and I can't make great theoretical claims. And I don't know whether they retain any enduring concept of resistance and rights, but the drama did help those 13-year-olds engage with distanced ideas. And I hope that it did help them see their world there in Ruawai and their forebears' stories otherwise. And I do know that Marsha had her class make commemorative crosses, and that the class photo of them all standing on a bright green New Zealand field was on the school website. And in doing that, she translated the ideas into action. So there is a greater likelihood that the ideas will persist. And I do know that drama work of that calibre holds great hope for shifting perspectives and bringing people and their stories closer. And the work that Nikki did with the rabbits to get her year 6 students, 10 and 11 years old, to think about colonisation. She too used the affordances of drama cleverly and appropriately to make those distanced ideas more comprehensible. The interview with the students also took place about 6 weeks afterwards and used photo prompts. In fact, this part of the story might be subtitled a butterfly print, a blanket and an old shirt, how the enjoyment of extended dramatic play let young people consider colonisation. And I could add, by looking beyond the classroom windows. I'll let the students' words tell more story here, because when I sat down with them for the interview, I watched them grab the photos and chatter delightedly. And it was this episode of dramatic playing that attracted most talk. Oh yeah, I loved that one. My favourite, when we dressed up and we sat around in a group, and Mrs. D was enrolled too, and she got to be strict. Remember, she flipped it round and she said, "We'll go and invade another country." That's the dramatic playing episode. And they've made the rabbits the invaders camp and enrolled as scientists. That's where the butterfly print came. It was an example of wildlife. And soldiers and business people and settlers, they report to their leader on the success of their takeover, to be informed then that the next potential target country for invasion and colonisation lies just across the Tasman Sea. They remembered very sharp details. Oh, we were soldiers and we had to report because she'd heard that the possums had resisted. We talked about the possums trying to take back part of their land, and we were talking to each other, shall we kill them or what do we do to them? And to ensure a distance between the fun of playing and to nudge towards thinking about the bigger ideas, Nikki established 3 contrasting attitudes: the invader, the invaded, and the profiteers. She then used a conscience corridor at the point when the invaders had been told that they were to be sent on to another invading mission. The girl who represented the head rabbit, head invader, remembered and described how she heard the voices and how she made sense of those ideas. I heard the rabbit's point of view, like, I don't want to do this, or keep going, don't let them get in your way. And the possums were like, what do we ever do to you? You came and invaded us. And they were going, what are we going to do? And the soldiers were like, what's the next group of possums that we're going to kill? And it made me think about the story. Well, first off, I kind of thought the possums were being annoying. And the rabbits were like, this is our land, so get out of our way. And then I realised that what actually was happening was just the opposite. The possums were living where it was their land, and then the rabbits came along and just kicked them out. The 6 children who were interviewed all remembered both those sessions with great clarity, the dramatic play and the conscience corridor. And they remembered the illustrations vividly, and they talked and remembered and worked through their ideas. In the first session, we actually thought the rabbits were cute and adorable, and possums are pests, but in terms of the story, it was actually the other way around. And in fact, that's quite a shift in perspective for kids in this country, because here, possums are pests and threaten our forests. But with the slow shaping of the story, they saw the perspectives of the invader and those who were being pushed off their land, and it was the identification with the land that proved the key to what those students took from the story. When they understood the invaders and then thought about what was happening in their own part of New Zealand, right outside their windows, the distance disappeared. We sat in the staff room with the photographs of the drama sessions and copies of the book. One girl grabbed the book. Oh, here are the pictures here. See, here it's all friendly. And at the end, there's a picture of sewers and empty lands and machines. And so it went from this to that. And the world used to be like this, but it's turning to this, and it happened so quickly. And it makes me feel sad, like the possums having a good time, and then the rabbits came and wrecked their land. Wrecked their land is the key. It's kind of what is happening here. 2 years ago, I looked out of my window, and I'd see hills over there, but now it's just houses. Their school sits at the northern edge of Auckland's urban expansion, and it won't be the edge for much longer, as green fields are taken over by housing developments. There was a very personal connection for that girl. I used to to be able to bike down the road and see farms, and now I only see houses. I have 4 younger brothers, one's only 5 months old, and by the time he's old enough to bike, it'll be all buildings. And she went on to speak about the drama. When the teacher read it first, I was really confused. I kind of got it, but it was just a story. But then she made us be the characters, and I felt what it was to be a possum and how that would be. And they did make the colonisation connection. She asked us for comparisons between the story and the real world, and I thought it was like wars and big countries taking over little countries, and like the Queen of England, she came to be the Queen of New Zealand. But they turned the telescope round and they saw the ideas up front and immediate in connection with their lives and their streets and beaches and greenfield horizons. And so the conclusions from the rabbit work might be that drama provided the affordances of dramatic playing, of identification with role, and the inside to out understanding that shifts between fiction and real worlds allow. Dramatic playing allowed those students to immerse themselves in the story and then step them back abruptly to make the familiar strange. And in the return to their own lives, they saw with new eyes. And drama teaching again provided structured reflection that enabled the students to look at ideas in a clear light. And last, my own researcher reflection. In a way, I'm a little downcast. I've been doing this stuff for ages, and I keep hoping that there'll be more time and opportunity for professional development for primary teachers. I wonder how I could do it more helpfully, and I remind myself that researching the work did give those teachers time and space for reflection, and it validated and valued their work, just as the feedback to the students had valued their work, student work. And on the wider national education scene, I'm downcast to see drama and the arts increasingly distanced within curriculum in schools and very reduced in initial teacher education, which is where I work. This really concerns me. As part of my work, I've been involved in reshaping and reviewing initial teacher education programs, and it is a battle to keep the arts in place with dedicated courses here at university. More teacher preparation is being given over to schools, which in our area, the arts, really alarms me. Some schools might have good programs, but pre-service teachers on their practicums are not going to see good drama. They'll see music and visual art, but encounters with drama will be few and far between. And it won't be long before teachers will be happy to cover drama with a few short skits. It horrifies me, because I maintain that here at university is where they must have sound, expertly taught drama experiences, although they will never know from the inside out. And we search for solutions, cluster groups, support systems, workshop sessions, but primary teachers with a keenness for drama are a rare breed. Juliana did prod me a little, asking, what is the future of drama education? And probably many of us here look into the distance and wonder. I loved resource making at the time the ministry put money into the arts. Maybe this time there might be a chance for more of that. But I finish with the last note on distance, and it's back to the classroom context. A teacher, I think, has to stand in the middle distance, watching as students and ideas emerge from the landscape, recording and mapping the journey, noticing the directions and the turns, and sending them off prepared towards the next horizon. Thank you.
Did you work with these teachers to help them plan this? Or
Yes, we did.
So that was, you were kind of co-mentoring
We did.
them,
I
like
was
Robin.
yes.
Robin was talking
They had the ideas. They knew that that was what they wanted. Marsha was certainly going to be using My Brother's War because that was a year 8 text.
Right.
And Nikki, I'd worked with Nikki a lot, and she wanted to use the words.
So we worked with her.
And maybe to follow on to that, did you co-teach in the room or were they teaching?
With one I did.
Okay.
Nikki, she taught mostly, but
Okay.
Marsha, it just worked.
So you could kind of work together
We
then?
worked together.
Just since you had both of those experiences, do you feel, just sort of comparing those two, what would you prefer, or what do you think is gained? What are the affordances of each of those different sorts of ways of working? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the situation with the year 8 students, the older students, it was really valuable, especially in the reflection period when both of us could question.
Yep.
And we just got them to talk more and more and more. So tossing questions around the classroom with 2 of us there was really useful.
It just makes me think about the kind of scope we've had this in all 3 of these questions around that combined space of the teaching artist or the mentor teacher in there and the classroom teacher, generalist teacher learning the model. It's sort of when do we have both in there, who's leading? It's really interesting questions for our field, I think, in general, as we design these sorts of projects and programs. So interesting to think about.
Thank you very much. I really loved that presentation, and looking at all 3 presentations, where I'm at the moment is I am in that space between government and what's going on in schools. And I think what we all need to do to answer that question about feeling a bit despondent about where things are at, quite rightly so, is that politicians, they speak to what they know, and they don't know much about lots of things, but they know that their kids go to school, and that when their kids go to school, often in private schools, they get to have arts education because their schools can afford quality arts teachers, because as we know, arts in schools can mean many different things if they're not taught properly, and that drama means a lot of that's happening. So I think I'm going to take away from today's session how we message this to our politicians. And I know as soon as one of them has a kid who's interested in drama, suddenly that becomes the new thing. But they should all be interested in it, and how we're going to do that. And I think that was so beautifully kind of expressed through your piece. So sorry if not asking you a question, but I just wanted to reflect back to you that I totally agree that needs to be strongly communicated. And maybe out of this conference, partly is we need to get angrier and more targeted back to our politicians and our people to say, you cannot say you don't know now what you are doing. You can still do it, it's your prerogative because you've got the power, but don't tell us that we didn't tell you, because we are telling you that what you're doing will have these effects. Because this is such valuable, beautiful work that you are doing with these younger students who haven't got this much.
I wonder whether, picking up on your point, there is a gap that what you say about politicians are human beings with children, and so are system policy makers in education authorities, but they don't make decisions to have imaginative play in preschools, and they don't make decisions often to have literacy taught through drama, or as our first and last presentation suggested. And it's because they don't, it's the practical experience, it's the live experience that is necessary. And I mean, I think maybe, and all of these 3 showed lovely work going on in schools, known to the children and the people who were there, but not known to the people who weren't there. And I guess it's one of the things some of us have been wrestling with for decades, centuries. to give those who have got the influence just a touch of that experience. It is possible. Sometimes a program we ran some years ago on using drama in conflict management in schools, kind of almost semi-accidentally got some primary principals involved in what was a practical half-day session. They were blown away, and all those primary principals wanted this program, which was supposed to start in secondary schools, in their primary schools, because they just had a taste of it. And that was enough. And there's a famous New Zealand story of Everyday Theatre, the Peter and Bryce company, getting the Commissioner for Police for New Zealand into the classroom, being blown away by their work, but also saying, I came because there was a woman came 20 years ago. I sat in on a class by some woman called Mrs. Hetker. And have you heard of her? It's just, the question I'm posing is, how do we take it out from something we hold among ourselves and get those human beings, the human being side of the officials, into seeing it? I think that's our real big challenge now.
I think it's beyond that. I think that no matter what they think is attractive or fun, I think right now, at least in the United States context, the thing that speaks to them is numbers. If you can show what makes an effect on student learning outcomes that they care about, which incidentally are math and literacy, as in only math and literacy, then you can bring it into the system. And just so you understand the dire state of education in the US right now, the Secretary of Education, her children did not go to public school. She has very little education background, and she believes that instead of making the public schools better, you should give them vouchers so they can be farmed out to some private school somewhere, which means those who don't know, the least educated of the low-income families, are going to be in the public schools, and everyone else will be farmed out to where they may or may not have arts education. And so the only way we can do that, to talk to our government, I think, is numerically. This will make a difference. Here are the numbers.
I don't think the two are self-contradictory. I think the two are essentially complementary.
I think that's true.
Because those people who are at the moment only looking at the numbers, they're only looking at the numbers because they don't understand, and they don't understand how to read the numbers. Like the South Australian authority that had wonderful results when an Aboriginal school included music and circus skills into what had previously been an arts-free curriculum. They got the test results and the truancy results and things like that going up like that for 8 years. Then they stopped the program and sacked the principal who was running it. The test results immediately started going down, but the authority didn't put two and two together and say it's because the circus skills and music were now no longer happening. They thought it was other reasons and were still saying 5 years later, well, the problem was that when we had music, it was 40 minutes out of their literacy learning every day. Oh. And so, I honestly think that those figures have to be given to them. You're quite right. I think your quantitative research is fantastically important, providing you get the right
well, that'd be nice too.
which is great. But it can only work when people can interpret the numbers and understand them. So
I think that's where we as researchers have to interpret the numbers for them in really clear and unambiguous ways. As long as our data supports it, we can't have fake data. Although in the US we have all sorts of fake facts these days. But we can't have fake data, but if you have the data and you can explain why this is what it means in really clear and unambiguous ways, to say, look, here's what the circus was, here's whether you took the circus away, look at this, these are clearly indicate that it had an effect, that is our job, to interpret the data in clear ways that will help compel the, but you know, you have to get the data, and that's one of the problems.
We have the data, critical links and
Yeah.
DC material, we have that data.
Yes.
And we have a government, well, I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the government now is totally different from the one that, you know, when the Kennedy Center was doing that.
I just wanted to make the comment, moving away from policymakers, that it's also, I think, a huge challenge is empowering teachers to have the confidence and to really embrace drama in the classroom, because regardless of policy, if you have a good teacher on the ground who believes in drama and who brings it to the classroom, I think that is just, it's a change maker. And I think that is a huge challenge at the moment, because a lot of teachers are afraid of drama. They don't know if they take it so personally, whereas it's not them, it's for the children, it's the children's experience that is the most important. So that would be where I think there's
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to suggest that, and I said it the other day, that we also need to communicate with parents and communities more broadly. Where we've been able to take it to the parents, it has been extraordinary. So I
That's where I did that no community, because that also I think is very.
But the parents actually experiencing the school drama has had profound effects where we've been able to do it, and I actually think, you know, if we were able to communicate much more broadly to communities, school communities, and parents, and we have had some of those opportunities, but not enough. Then they will insist. I had one parent say to the principal, who wasn't keen about having it, he said, "Oh, the parents have already been to PED, so you're not going to get any." Over 40 parents came. Some of them brought their children, and on the way out, a number of the parents said, "I hope every child in this school is having the opportunity to have this kind of drama in the classroom." And he was incredibly embarrassed because he had been so negative. He wasn't one of the principals who came. You know, we actually asked the principals or the executive to come to experience it. I think it is the experience in some way, as you said, if we can get the policymakers and that.
I think you're saying something that's really profound, because in the end, at least in the U.S., the parents are voters, and if they really think the parents will rise and make a difference, and that's, I had never really thought about trying to really target the parents, and I think that's a very provocative idea.
I remember the parent-teachers night, and we had students, teachers at the school, who would be doing a process drama, a role drama, a story drama structure, and it would be parents' night, and the parents would come in, and they'd be shown some of the work, and then next thing they knew, they were right inside the drama. They were having to work with that king. Building that castle up there and taking all the water, for God's sake. So I think John's idea, you know, that you can do this very subtly by just simply saying, join the learning with us. And it's really quite great, because the kids are so supportive of the work that the teacher doesn't have that fear, which I think I know really well. You know, that, oh fuck, I know how to know, but will it work? If we can't bring the parents in, will I be okay? But when the kids are already on side, they're the support for the teacher, and the teacher's the support for the discipline. So
The model I could also talk about a bit very quickly is live in Austin, Texas, and we participated 7 years ago in a year-long strategic planning. So it was the arts and cultural sector, 40 members of that, higher education, which I was leading, the city, our slightly different school system, so it's a public school system run by the city, 130 campuses, high levels of English language learners, mid to low socioeconomic status for most of our students. And we spent a year together at 3 hours a week. No, it's 3 hours a month, I guess, 3 hours a month. And we did an analysis. This was kind of led through the Kennedy Center, as in a given child city. And we did an analysis of the impact of the arts across all of our schools, and we made it an equity and access issue. So we really noticed when we mapped all of that work together side by side that arts education wasn't happening in even ways, the outside activities weren't happening in even ways. And we also assessed every single teacher and principal in the entire 130 group of public schools we said, if you had training in what we call in the US arts integration, would you be interested? And they said yes. So we used all that. And our philanthropy, we leveraged them as well. They were part of all of that sort of analysis. And we put together a 10-year strategic plan for year 6. It's a collective impact model, so we all give something towards it. Professional learning for every single person in every school in creativity and learning. So, and it's got problems up the wazoo too, which I'm happy to also talk about. But I think it is that idea. I mean, you're really speaking to that idea of the collective space and how are we coming together to do those analyses. So I'm happy to hook people towards that model if you want to share those things out, because I think it's pretty powerful.